Hello everyone, welcome back to Salesforce Predator. In this channel we discuss about various concepts and technologies in Salesforce. This video is part of Salesforce integration series where we are learning different areas of integration in Salesforce and preparing for certification exam as well. Now in today's video we'll learn about Apex REST API, or we can say Apex Web Services. When you say Apex Web Services, it is important to note that we are talking about inbound integration. Now, inbound integration means some third-party system or external application is going to make callouts to Salesforce to consume some of its resources. Let's say this is our Salesforce application. With web service hosted inside it, okay? And this is an external application. This is an external application. Now, in case of inbound integration, what will happen? This external application will make use of HTTP methods to send a request to our web service, and our web service will perform the required operation and respond back to this external application with the results. Okay. Since we are talking about REST web services, the third-party application or an external application can use any of the HTTP REST methods to make call out to this web service. So they can use either HTTP GET, HTTP POST, they can use PUT, they can use patch, or even delete operations, right? So let's see how a web service works. Let's say we have a requirement where an external application want to get detail of account record by passing the account ID to Salesforce. Now, how do you write an Apex REST web service? So we just have to create an Apex class. Let's say account service. Right? Now there are few important points we need to remember while writing Apex web service. First, we need to annotate this web service, this Apex class with REST resource, and we also need to add URL mapping to it. So we'll add REST resource and we'll add URL mapping as well. We can add it as accounts services, right? Now this REST resource indicate this is an Apex web service, and this URL mapping is nothing but endpoint for this web service. One important point is that this URL mapping has to be unique across the org, so to avoid any conflict with other web services. Further, this Apex class has to be global so that it can be accessible outside the Salesforce org by external application. We can keep it as with sharing or without sharing, but it is recommended to have with sharing so that the web service will return only the data which current user has access to, right? So we'll keep it as with sharing, and we do not require this constructor, so we'll just remove it. Now, as per requirement, external application is sending account ID to us and they are expecting account details as a response. So it will be a get method because the request will not have body associated to it, right? So we'll have to write an HTTP get method to handle that kind of request. So let's write it down. To write down the get method, we need to annotate it with HTTP get, and the modifiers can be global static. It can be public and non-static as well, but it's easier, or we can say it is recommended to use global static because it will be easier for external application to access it, right? And the return type would be account, and we can name it as get account. Return type is account because we would be sending back account record details. And important point is we cannot have parameter in the get methods because the ID would be passed along with the URL. So we just have to use the REST context to get the parameter from the URL. Okay. We'll have a account ID and we'll take its value from rest context dot request dot params dot get of parameter name, which is id in our case. Okay, now this rest context over here, it is an apex class which gives information about the request and response in the web service. Okay, now this is the property of this rest context class, and this is a method to get the id from the uh, parameters. Okay, next thing is we need to return the account record associated to this id. So we will add some parameters as well. Let's say name, type, industry. Okay, from account where id equals to id being passed, right? We'll deploy this code to Salesforce. Now, before sending this endpoint URL to external application, it is best practice to test this web service, right? For now, we'll be using an easy way to test this web service using Workbench. In next video, I'm going to tell you how we can set up authentication for this web service and also use Postman to test this. Okay. Now let's go to our Salesforce org and find some account record. Meanwhile, we can log into Workbench as well. Let's say this account record only. Okay. To test the REST web service, we need to go into this REST Explorer and add the endpoint URL over here. Okay. So for testing the web service, we need to write apex rest slash, and here we need to add the URL mapping which we have added in our apex web service, right? So this will be uniquely identifying our web service. So we'll just add it over here. Now, since this is a get request, we will keep it selected over here in the get, and we will add a ID also because we need to get the account details, right, by passing this ID. So ID will be equals to any account ID in Salesforce. Let's say this one. One important point to note is this ID parameter over here, it should exactly match with this ID specified over here. Okay, otherwise it will throw you an error. Let's try to execute this. Let's see if we can get something. Right. So we are getting accounts detail as a response, right? Whatever fields we have specified in this query, right? We are getting as a response when we are making call to this web service, correct? Now let's say while writing this web service and fetching the ID parameter, you have specified ID in the web service like this, okay? And if you will deploy this, so this ID is different from the ID being sent in the request, right? So let's see what happens. Let's try to execute this. It will throw an error to you. Why? Because this ID is not there in the request. So it will give a null value here, right? And it will again throw an error over here while querying over the null value, correct? Now let's say this external web application, it wants to create the account record as well, right? So earlier they just wanted to get the account record by specifying the ID. Now they want to create the account record also. Now creating an account record in Salesforce is similar to insert operation, right? And for handling such kind of request, we need to write the post methods, okay? That's HTTP post method. So how we can write that? We'll have to annotate it with HTTP post, and again it will be global static. Return type can be void or it can be account also. Okay, so let's say for now we will keep it as account. We will return what we are inserting, and let's say create account. Now let's say external application is passing account name, type, and industry as parameters in the request, right? So these are the details external application is passing. So we need to create parameters for those. So it will be string account name, then type and industry. Okay. So whatever details we are getting, based on that we'll create the account record. Okay. So let's say account ACC object equals to account. We'll map the details. Industry equal to industry being passed, and we'll insert the account record. Okay, and finally we will return the account object record inserted. That's it. Okay, so let's try to deploy this. Let's go to Workbench and test it. Since it is a post method, we'll select post here. Okay, now we don't require any ID over here, right? And we need to specify the request body. Okay, now request body can be either in JSON format or it can be XML. If you are not aware of XML and JSON format, we already have created video on that, so you can watch that. For now we'll be selecting JSON, and JSON is nothing but a key value pair which you can use to send the details in the REST APIs. Okay, so let's see how we can create it. We need to send name value, right? So it will be test integration. Key value pairs we need to separate using comma operator. Okay, type could be, let's say, prospect, and industry can be, let's say, banking. Okay, let's try to execute this. There is an error, unexpected parameter encountered during deserialization. Okay, line 2, and let's see this. Okay, so this names should match actually. So whatever names we have specified here, right? So it should match the keys present over here in the JSON request. Okay, so let's do that. Let's say if it is like this. Now this is very important point. Most of the time it gives error. So we need to match the names exactly with the parameters. Now you can see it is a success and it has returned a ID of record which got created. Okay, so let's try and see this record. You can see this test integration record. It is created successfully in the Salesforce, right? Now, let's say instead of just creating the record, what external application wants is they also want to update an existing record. Okay, so for that we already have HTTP patch method, right? So let's write down a method for patch as well. We'll just copy this, and instead of post it has to be patch. Now since we are updating an account record, we need to have an ID of record which needs to be updated, right? So we need to add one more parameter here. Let's say string account ID, correct? And what we can do is we can query the account record and update it, right? So here we can specify socle from account where ID equals to ECC ID, right? And we will modify the name, type, and industry of this account record. And here we can write update, and then we will return the updated record. Okay, so let's try to deploy this. Let's go to Workbench, and here now we will select patch, and we need to have one more parameter here, that is account ID. The name should match exactly, so we'll just copy it from here. And we will take any other account. Let's say I'll go to account, let's take this record and put ID over here. Let's try to execute this. Now it's showing some error. Let's try to check what exactly it is. Unexpected parameter ID. Okay, so let's try to compare it. Okay, we missed it, so it has to be account ID, right? So let's try it now. You can see the account record, it got updated. Let's try to check in Salesforce. You can see the name is now test integration instead of Jimmy, right? So that's how HTTP patch works. Now there is another method, HTTP put, which also updates the record, but there is slight difference in the implementation. In case of HTTP patch, whatever information we are providing to it, it will update only those information and it will not touch other field. Okay, so let's say if we are providing four fields value over here, right, in HTTP patch method, so it will update those four fields and it will not touch other values. In case of HTTP put, it replaces the resource with new values. That means whatever field values we are supplying over here in the request, it will update the fields with those values and other fields will be made as null. Okay. Also, we have HTTP delete method. HTTP delete is used to delete a resource in a Salesforce org by specifying the ID in the request. So let's try that. And HTTP delete will not have a request body. We will just specify the ID of the record to be deleted in the URL itself, right? So it's similar to get. We need to annotate it with HTTP delete. Return type can be void. Now we can get the ID from request in a similar way, the way we have done in the HTTP get method. Okay, so just get the account ID and we can perform a delete DML operation. It has to be account ID over here. Okay, now let's deploy this to Salesforce. Let's go to the workbench and try delete operation. So we'll select delete over here, and we don't have to specify any body, just had to specify the ID in URL. Okay, so question mark ID equals to any record ID, let's say this one, and let's try to execute this. So we are getting 200 response. Let's try to refresh this record. You can see this record has been deleted. Okay, so this is how you can perform a delete operation on a record using HTTP delete method, right? So in this video, we saw how we can write an Apex web service, what all points to keep in mind while writing an Apex web service, what are different HTTP methods and how we can use them in our Apex web service. Also, we tested our Apex web service methods using Workbench. In next video, we'll see how we can set up authentication so that external application can use our Apex web service by making callouts to it. We'll also see how we can utilize Postman to test our Apex web service. Thank you for watching this video and do not forget to subscribe the channel.